Welcome live to the first ever live stream of the Loud Marlins Fans Podcast. And if you're listening to me on the normal podcasting network of your choice, I'm now going to be live streaming the Loud Marlins Fan Podcasts right here where you're seeing it now. And that will be announced to the podcasting world in the near future. With that being said, I am here to talk about Marlins baseball for the next however long this goes. I know that they say the best podcasts are roughly between 30 to 35 minutes, but I don't know if I could get everything off my chest that I've been holding in for the last month since the last podcast recording until then. So on this episode of the Loud Marlins Fans Podcast, me, the Loud Marlins fan, LMF, will review the last few weeks of Marlins baseball. And I'm going to rewind it back to where our expectations were at the beginning of the season and have they changed and where we're going and how we're going to get there on this episode of the LMF podcast. So thank you for listening. Again, my name is Chase Blake. I am the loudest Marlins fan at the ballpark and on social media. I'm not affiliated with the baseball team in any way, shape, or form. I do not have a contract with them. They do not pay me. I am a fan. I actually pay them to go to their stadium and watch their product on the field while cheering from it there and from here. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, I want to speak kindly and clearly about how overly excited I am to be 7 games over 500. And that is where the Miami Marlins stand as of this podcast or this video cast, depending on where you're listening or you're watching. It's crazy to think at the beginning of the season, some fans' expectations were so low that they could not see this team be where it is. They could not see the plan that materialized or came together that Kim and G and the front office had put in place for this team to contend or be where they are now. If you think back to opening day, you would think that the strength of this team would be the rotation. The starting 5 going into the season opener: Sandy Alcantara, Jesus Luzardo, Eddie Cabrera, Trevor Rogers, Johnny Cueto. Again, those were the starting 5 when this season started. It didn't last long. Johnny Cueto lasted an inning. He gave up a lot of runs. And then he was done. Out. Peace. Injury. Hasn't been back since. Went through a rehab. Got re-injured. So automatically, that changes the rotation. And your long man in the bullpen was Braxton Garrett. Braxton is now in the starting rotation and has been doing amazing. He's had one horrible start versus the Braves. We're going to put that as a wash. But then we're going to talk about this week in his start versus Kansas City. Not a great start, but he ended up getting the win. He adjusted and started throwing like he had been the 5 starts prior. So I talk about that, but then I mentioned Sandy Alcantara, the Cy Young winning pitcher. And he himself has not had the stud season that he had last year. He seems to be having issues when runners are on base. Now, a lot of things are different than last year. One major difference is the shift. He was used to a lot of ground ball outs last year because of the shift. This year, it's not happening, so he's dealing more with runners on base, and that is having some mental effect of some sort on him. I'm not going to talk trash about Sandy. I'm just stating where he is on the season. If you go with the second starter in this opening day rotation, Jesus Luzardo, he's more or less lived up to the guy who we thought we had. In a lot of his starts, he is on fire, at least to start the game. And then through the rotation, the third or fourth time is when he starts to lose it. Let's take, for example, his start versus the Padres. His first 2 innings, pretty good. Like 2 strikeouts, 6 quick outs. The third, I think it was the third inning or fourth inning, where he started giving up hits and walks. He walked 3 straight. He didn't end up staying in the game much longer. And then one of the bullpen guys, Matt Barnes, came in, and Matt Barnes gave up a plethora of runs. But then you go to a game like Jesus Luzardo just had versus the Kansas City Royals, and that's the guy, 8 strikeouts, 7 innings. I think he had like 2 hits or something to that effect. That's the guy who we thought, and we know we have. That's the guy that was what we traded for when we gave up Starling Marte to the Oakland Athletics. I mean, he wasn't this good then, but we knew, or the front office and the scouts knew, this is the guy he could be with our pitching coach at the helm. Then you go to Eddie Cabrera. And Eddie Cabrera, oh my gosh, he started the season up giving walk after walk after walk. And he still has that issue. It's gotten better. When he has confidence, when Eddie Cabrera has confidence and he's throwing the ball in the strike zone, he's basically unhittable. When he loses his confidence and starts throwing everywhere else but the strike zone and puts all these guys on base, that's where his problems come. So you think it's all in his head also. He has to throw strikes. Trevor Rogers. Trevor Rogers has been injured. I mean, look, he started the season off iffy anyway. He's had some good games. Like he had games in which he showed he's the guy from early 2021 or the first half of 2021 when he was an all-star. But then, again, another guy who's in his own head, it seems, with his slider and his fastball, that he starts getting hit and it all goes downhill. So there's 4 out of 5 of your starters. Johnny Cueto, again, lasted like no time on this team so far. He's been on the injured list. He got blown up in that start that he had. So can't really discuss anything about Johnny Cueto. But you talk about Braxton Garrett, and I mentioned how he's had a few one rough game, one rough start, in which he ended up winning this week. But other than that, he's been your most consistent starting pitcher. Sandy, as I mentioned, he's having some issues, but Brax is a guy who's going to throw a lot of pitches, but he's going to hit the strike zone, and he's going to make you hit the ball. So he's going to give up home runs. I mean, he's not giving up home runs like Eliezer Hernandez did every like 3 batters, but he is giving up a home run here or there. But that's going to happen when he hit the strike zone. I mean, he's inducing the pop-ups and he's inducing the grounders. So that's his job, and that's what he does and how he pitches. And then you look at how he gets through the lineup on the other team. By the third time, they keep taking him out or he starts giving up hits. He doesn't make the adjustments needed. They'll work on that. But he started this curveball that's freaking good, or a changeup. One of the two, an off-speeder. He's doing well with that pitch. It's a new pitch, and he's developed it, and it's helping him out. So your starting rotation is more or less been a problem, and the bullpen is being taxed. But the thing is, this bullpen is pretty damn good. Every bullpen's going to falter here and there. It's going to happen. Dylan Floro's been pretty much lights out in the closer role when AJ Puck, who we traded for, got injured. But Dylan Floro, when you put him in the 7th, when AJ was out, he didn't do so well. So you got to put him in the right spots to succeed. And Skip Schumacher is going to learn that. By the way, Skip Schumacher, best thing that's happened to this team as far as a manager is concerned in probably 4 tries. Y'all know how I feel about Don Mattingly. Great person, great player, is not a good baseball manager of a team. He doesn't do well with the bullpen as far as bringing them in or changing it around. And to be honest, this team looked flat with him at the helm for the last 2 years. 2020 was something special, but we're not counting that year because it was only 60 games. Don Mattingly is not the worst through 60 games. It's 162 games that his managing has issues with. So the last 2 years, you had some talent, and it went to waste. And there was no oomph. There was no comebacks. We lost 42 one-run games last season. This season, I think we've lost 4, and we have 16 or 17 wins of one-run games. That's the difference of a manager. Many said to me, and I mean, quite frankly, they blasted me for my thoughts on Don Mattingly. But in all honesty, it is a big difference in the manager that's making the whole difference on this team. So he's holding them accountable. He's giving them good advice. He's making sure no one ever gives up. Look, I don't care who you play. They're still Major League Baseball players. And you're playing Oakland at home, and you go down by 4 runs. You come back, and you end up winning that game. Monday, the day immediately after, again, I mentioned a tough Braxton Garrett start. Gave up 4 runs in the first inning or so, first couple innings or so. And the Marlins came back and won the game. It's the first time in gosh knows how long that the Marlins had back-to-back wins coming back by 4 runs or more. So you appreciate what this manager has meant to this team and how he's driving them or making them more driven to never give up and always succeed. So you got to appreciate that. So the manager change made a difference. And then comes your lineup and the plan that the Marlins had coming into the season. They didn't make big moves going out of or into the winter meetings. They didn't sign the Trey Turners. They didn't sign these big 7 to 11-year contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That's not their game plan. It's not, and it's never going to be their game plan to do so. And you could call the owner cheap, but I'm thankful that he's cheap. I'm kind of thankful that he's not throwing money around like it's monopoly money like Steve Cohen is, because they're building a team. They're sticking to a plan. They're molding the puzzle pieces into the right spots right now. Will it last the whole season? Who knows? We are 7 games over 500. And if I was to tell you in June that 7 games over 500 is where we'd be with the rotation issues with injuries, I mean, Trevor, Johnny down for the bulk of the season so far, that was supposed to be your strength. If I was to tell you Jazz Chisholm Jr., who moved to center field, he was part of that puzzle piece building, moved to center field. He's been out with turf toe for 3 or 4 weeks now. But the Marlins keep winning. Now, we had a road trip. It was the longest road trip of the season. We had 3 in San Francisco. We lost 2 of 3. We had 4 in Colorado. We lost 3 of 4. But then we went back to California and faced the Angels. Shohei Ohtani. We beat Shohei Ohtani. Maybe he didn't get the loss, but on the day he started, we beat that team. He didn't get the win. He didn't. I'll even say, which I haven't mentioned yet, Yuri Perez outdueled Shohei Ohtani. By the way, we called up the youngest pitcher in franchise history in Yuri Perez. Yuri Perez, I met when he was 17 years old at a Marlins spring training game. He was in the stands, and I went to bother him. We talked. We didn't talk. I don't speak Spanish. One of my friends spoke for me and spoke to him. But a nice kid back then. He still has that smile, and he's really he came up earlier, and I think he's 3-1 right now, or 4-1. He has a bright future, so we'll see what happens with him. I'm all for a 6-man rotation and keeping him up in some way, shape, or form. So Yuri's been great, but we swept. I think more importantly here is we swept the Anaheim Angels, Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, at their stadium, at Angel Stadium. That's something we didn't plan on doing. I mean, going into that series, I thought we were going to lose 2 of 3 just because you're facing Shohei Ohtani. It's difficult. But and Mike Trout. But this team found a way to win. They found a way not to lose those 3 games, and that's what really started this mentality of winning. We were on the borderline, 2 up, 2 down, 2 up, 2 down, 500, go down, up. It was over the place. But since that series, since that sweep, the schedule kind of flipped. We had a rough April schedule, and we rode the waves, if you will, as Marlins. We rode the waves of the season so far. April was not an easy schedule. Either was May. End of May, as I just mentioned, this 10-game road trip. And then you come home, and you swept Anaheim. You come home 2 up, over 500. And then you face the Padres. Now, San Diego hasn't played up to their spending expectation, but they're still a good team. Machado didn't play that series, but mostly everyone else who's an all-star or big name did. Tatis, Soto. I'm forgetting all of their names right now, but they're spending a plethora of money themselves on a good team, and they have good pitching. They beat us 2 of 3. You should lose to a team that's spending $290 million plus if you're only spending 88. On paper, you should lose. The Marlins were only out of, I think, one of those games where it really got blown out. So you got to give them some credit as they won the middle game in there. They lost the first and the last. Before the Padres came down, after the Angels series, I had made a tweet. And in my tweet, I had said that if all goes to the way I'm thinking, the Marlins should leave Miami for the road trip in Chicago, at least. And I said I did say they will go 7-2, but then I kind of retracted. And I said, you know what, I'm going to be on the smarter side of where I'm going to forecast. I said they're going to go 6-3, and they're going to leave Miami 5 games above 500. I was wrong. The Marlins outdid where I thought they'd be, and they won 7 of the 9 games. So they left Miami 7 games above 500. So it was a 5-game pickup since we got home. Congrats to them. Like, they're playing against bad teams in Oakland and the Kansas City Royals, but they're beating them. And they really crushed them. It was all different types of wins. They got leads on us, big leads, as I've mentioned, and we came back and just beat them. We outdueled their pitching, and we really showed that we could be contenders because contenders beat bad teams. They beat up on them. They treat teams like we treated the Nationals in 2022. You beat up on the bad teams. The problem is, under Don Mattingly, this team did not beat up on the bad teams, the teams that were worse than us, like Pittsburgh last year, like the Reds last year. We did lose a series to the Reds this year. They have a nice little nucleus of a team. They're not winning as many games yet, but they have a nice nucleus. So the Reds are going to red. But this last year, we lost to the Pirates. We lost to the Reds. We lost to the Oaklands. And you can't do that when you want to contend. So what does the Marlins do? They swept the Oakland A's in Miami, and then immediately after, they swept the Royals out of Miami. So a nice week of summer cleaning at Lone Depot Park as we swept Oakland and swept the Royals out to be 7 games over 500. We're second place in the National League East. No one forecasted us to be there. You know who did? Jazz Chisholm Jr. I'll give him credit here. I had made a tweet saying the Marlins are going to compete for 3rd in the division. He goes, 3rd? Am I not on the team? Well, Jazz, right now you're not on the team. You're on the injured list. We want you back. We love you. We wish you were healthy. But you're not on this team right now, and we're still winning. And you're beating my expectations as you're in second place by a good 2 or 3 games, I think. I apologize if you're watching the stream, and I'm looking down right now, because I'm trying to see where the standings are, any updates from any games that were played this afternoon. So let's take a look at that. You ready? All right. So as of this video recording on at 8:30 p.m. on a Thursday night, the 8th of June, the Marlins are 35-28. We are 4.5 games above the Mets. The Mets beat us. The Mets played the majority of playing the Marlins this season. There's 13 games versus your division teams this year. The Mets have played us already 7 times. They beat us 5 of those 7, and we're still 4 games above them at this point in the season. That's not something small to twiddle your fingers around. We are 4. It's June. I'm not saying this may stand. You don't know what moves everybody's going to make. But as of this video, the Marlins are 4 bleeping games above the 3rd place New York Mets. There's nothing you can do that'd be more excited than that. We are 5 games above the Philadelphia Phillies, and we're only 3 behind the Braves. And we play the Braves another 6 times also. So the division kind of could be in our grasp. The Braves are winning. We're winning. That's okay. Let's go up together and take real stranglehold of that wild card spot. Because in a full season, when the Miami Marlins the Marlins franchise wins a wild card, in a full season, we win the World Series. You can't say I'm wrong there. We are the only team in 162 game seasons that win the wild card in 162 game seasons that are undefeated in the playoffs. Yes, 2020, we broke our playoff wins streak. We had 7 series wins without a series loss. That was 3 to get to the World Series in 97, 3 to get to the World Series and win it in 2003. And then in 2020, we won the first series against the Cubs, swept them out of Wrigley. Whether it counts on the record book or not, it does. But in a regular season, the Marlins do not lose when they win the wild card in a regular season, full season playoff run. So that's where we are right now. And going back to preseason, no one expected this. I mean, me as the loudest Marlins fans, my expectations were the Marlins being anywhere between 75 or 76 wins to 82 wins. I have us in that range. And to be honest, I think that's an accomplishment. You don't usually go from a 67 to a 69 to a 95 win team. It's very rare. I think the most recent team to do it is the Boston Red Sox, who did it. They were the worst in the league. Then they won the World Series the next year and then went back to being the worst in the league. So other than that team, there hasn't been one that has gone up so much in one season without spending so much money. And the Marlins didn't spend much. And again, it's a plan. So what brought us to this point? I haven't even mentioned that we have a player named Luis Arraez who's batting .403. No, not this week. That's not what I meant. I meant he's batting .403 on the season as of this video. Wow. That's something that hasn't been done in a full season since Ted Williams. Ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, thems, it is June 9th tomorrow when the Marlins are on the road in Chicago. And Luis Arraez, our second baseman, who we traded for Pablo Lopez with another guy. We traded Pablo Lopez and another player for Luis Arraez as part of this plan, and he's hitting .403. He's one of the reasons why we're 7 over, because he bats in the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5 spot this season, and he hits no matter where he is. So depending on who's active that game and who's healthy, the Skip is setting up the team to put Arraez in the perfect spot, whether it be a leadoff spot, whether it be at second or third, or even in the cleanup areas. He's hitting, and he doesn't stop hitting. All right, he has his 0-4s games, right? 0 for whatever. Last Friday was 1. You know what he did after? He went 12 of the next 17. in just the Royal Series alone, batted .586. This is history. We are watching history. So if you're listening to this podcast or watching this video cast, you better vote for Luis Arraez as the starting second baseman of the National League East. Sorry, the National League All-Star team. But he is the best second baseman, at least in the National League East, and he deserves to be in the National League All-Star game. Guys, beast at the plate. And this was part of the plan. This was part of that cheap plan. Let's trade Pablo. We're not going to sign Pablo Lopez. We love Pablo Lopez. We do. We did. We do. We always will. We will always appreciate the years that he gave Miami and that smile that and the passion that he brings to the game. He's now with Minnesota, and he started off hot in his first 3 to 4 starts, but he's kind of come down to the normal Pablo, which isn't a bad player, just an average, decent pitcher in a rotation. He's the ace of their rotation, you can say. But he's a third or fourth guy in a regular great rotation, even in ours. That's where, but he's not here. And you know what the best is for Pablo? The best thing is Pablo got paid $73 million for the next 5 years to be in the Twins. Marlins weren't going to pay him. It worked out for everyone because here you go, all right? The Marlins got Luis Arraez, all right? They have him under control for another 4 years. They're going to, or 3 years. They're going to extend him, okay? They will extend him. They have to extend him. He's so good. The Twins needed starting pitching. They got Pablo Lopez. He's doing well for them. He signs a contract. He gets paid. So Luis Arraez is getting paid, by the way. I mean, he's making I think $5 million this year, $6 million. That's only going to go up in any arbitration numbers, all right? Even if you avoid arbitration, you've settled before, it's going to go up, okay? So he may be a $8 to $10 million player next year, but he's here. They're not going to trade him. They're not going to give him up. As long as he's healthy, he will be here the next 2 to 5 years. I hope more. I hope he remains this good forever. But that's part of their puzzle. Moving Jazz to center field was part of their puzzle. Not re-signing guys like Brian Anderson. B.A. started off this season in the first 5 games. I think he had 3 or 4 home runs. Or first 10 games, 3 or 4 to 5 home runs. He was balling, but he's come back to earth. He's 233. He wasn't worth $6 million that we would have had to pay him in arbitration. Instead, we let him go as a free agent. He signed with the Milwaukee Brewers for $3 million. 1 season. And he'll probably get paid more next season. When healthy, Brian Anderson is a great third baseman. He's when he's healthy. Problem is he hasn't stayed healthy in years. He's not the 20 home run hitting guy who, with the Marlins, he wasn't with us in 2020, 21, or 22. Even in the short season in 2020, he just didn't have the power he did in 19. So if you follow what they did and who they didn't bring back, you look at Miguel Rojas. I think Miguel Rojas is batting anywhere in the 2 teens, the 220s right now. He wouldn't be a fit on this team right now. I mean, Joey Wendell's batting crap, but he's heating up a little bit. But you didn't need Rojas and Wendell. And they got Jacob Amaya, who's going out of his mind. He had a rough April, but since May, Jacob Amaya is doing amazing things at shortstop in the minors. He's going to be up here soon. They're just waiting for the perfect time, and what injuries can occur, who knows? And if you look at the injuries that the Marlins have had, let's talk about that for a minute or two here, okay? If I mentioned the pitchers, but let me tell you the position players who have been injured. Remember, the Marlins are paying Avisail Garcia, $56 million or something to that, 53, 54, somewhere in that range, over the next 4-year contract, the 5-year option. If you read Glenn Geffner's story on his blog page or whatever, please subscribe to it. He does amazing things. But Glenn was quoted as saying, Sherman, Derek Jeter promised Sherman after the purchase that he wouldn't have to spend big money. He promised him that. He said, I'm going to tear the team apart. This was that Wolverine plan. Tear the team apart, hire a great scouting and coaching staff, start at the bottom, work their way up, and that's how we're going to funnel this team. Well, you didn't sign Starling Marte when you went to the playoffs in 2020. You didn't sign him in 2021. You traded him at the deadline. Not a bad deal. You got back Jesus Luzardo. But that was really the start of the fall of Derek Jeter, because they could have paid Starling Marte less than they're paying Garcia, and they didn't. They thought he'd want to come back, but he didn't. He went to the Mets. So Derek lost Starling Marte, and you also lost a couple of prospects there for him when he traded for him in 2020. So at the end of the day, that's a mistake. That's on Jeter. And then Jeter begged for more money. He begged for more money. He said, please, Sherman, let's spend more. And Sherman argued with it. But somehow Derek Jeter talked him into spending the money for Avisail Garcia. And look where it panned out. Avisail Garcia hasn't done garbage for us. So Jeter was on thin ice. He got fired. Everyone's, he left on his own. He did not leave on his own terms. His own terms would have been his contract ran up and then he leaves. No, he left the organization with another year left on his contract after failing to keep his promise. Derek Jeter failed as an executive in Major League Baseball. I'm not changing my mind. I don't care what guys like Sweet Jazz Lounge says. He can yell at me and call me an idiot for this statement. Jeter stunk as a CEO and running a team, and he's no longer doing it because he sucked at it. So some mistakes there. And look at Avisail Garcia, who you have on your team. He's supposed to be your starting right fielder, has a horrible 2021, a horrible first year for this team as an audition for the fans. And then he comes back healthier looking, less bulky and jacked, but more in shape for 2022. And he's injured out with some injury for the last month and a half or 2 months. So you don't know when Avisail's coming back, but you don't miss him. You didn't miss him until Jesus Sanchez unfortunately went down with a hamstring issue for 10 days. You don't miss them until Jazz Chisholm goes out in the same game with turf toe. So now you're down outfielders. And those prospects that Derek Jeter loved and was working and drafted, well, they didn't pan out. I like Peyton Burdick a lot. I really do. Peyton Burdick's awesome. Great guy. Nice to speak with. Really just a good overall dude. And he's a big guy. He looks jacked, looks ready to be in the majors. He's blasting 10 home runs in like 2 weeks in AAA. And he comes up and he strikes out 47% of the time. You can't have that. So that forced Kim Ng-ji, who's been magic at finding players in other organizations in the outfield and bringing them up to the Marlins. She did it with Brian De La Cruz trading Yimi Garcia in 2021. At the deadline, Yimi Garcia, for a guy that most never heard of, Brian De La Cruz. He wasn't a top prospect in the Major League Baseball. He was a good prospect, but not a top prospect. But you trade for him, and look what he's turned into. The guy's batting .299 right now on your team. He's really heat up over the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Started off slow, but ever since they did something. John Jay, the batting coaches have done something to set him on fire right now. So good for him. But back to the problem at hand. Again, where we are is what I'm talking about. How and why we are 7 games over 500. You wouldn't seem like we could be there with those injuries that happened. That's 3 of your 5 opening day outfielders. Remember, your opening day outfielders, at least on the roster, Jorge Soler, Jazz Chisholm, Brian De La Cruz, Jesus Sanchez, Avisail Garcia. What happens? Avi gets injured. Then a couple weeks later, Sanchez gets injured on the same day Jazz goes down. Jazz still hasn't come back. Sanchez has. but 3 of your 5 opening day outfielders are not playing, you're bringing up guys like Peyton Burdick, and Burdick strikes out 47% of the time. They did the right thing. They sent him down, but they had to make a trade. They traded his name's Brady Allen, a minor league outfielder who's in the lower A's. They traded him to Detroit, the Detroit Tigers, who had a guy in their minor leagues, Jonathan Davis, who's a former major leaguer with the Toronto Blue Jays and just didn't live up to his potential. He was supposed to be a great rookie back in 18 or 19. So he's been in the minors. He has over 2,000 minor league at-bats, and he's been doing all right in AAA. The Tigers didn't need him. We trade for him. The guy comes up, and is he hitting his every game like we want him to? No, but he's changing the game. He's much better. He's so good in the outfield. He's great defensively, and he's speedy on the bases. So Jonathan Davis is a decent replacement. And then you have Garrett Hampson, a guy you signed to a minor league deal. Now, obviously, on the major league team, Garrett Hampson is from Denver. So you're putting little pieces in place of your starting parts. You're putting little places to fill them. The Marlins keep rolling because these pieces are fitting. And you got to give credit to the front office on that, because they're finding guys who are not expensive, because remember, you have a cheap owner, right? Yeah, we know it. I'm not arguing that he's not cheap, but with the money that he's willing to spend, they have a plan, and they're putting that plan in place, and they do really well with that plan in place. Okay, you can't say they're not. They're 7 games over 500. We weren't like this last season. We weren't like this the season before that. After the 2020 year, we weren't even this good since when we had Yelich, Ozuna, Stanton, JT Real Muto on the same team. If you think about it, these are real numbers. We haven't been 7 games over 500 in June since 2004. That is crazy. I remember that team. They just came off the World Series. You no longer have Derek Lee. You no longer have Pudge Rodriguez. You lost Mark Redmond in the pitching rotation. It's a different team than 03, but most of those guys were young. Josh Beckett just had a great World Series coming into his prime. AJ Burnett came back that year. You had a young Dontrell Willis in his second major league season. You had Miguel Cabrera in his second major league season. Mike Lowell on that team coming back from injury the previous season with the testicular cancer and then the injury that kept him out of most of the playoffs, but brought him back at the end when we needed him the most. So if you think about it, this team is doing something that hasn't been done since 2004. That's 19 years. We haven't had a team that's 7 games over 500 this late in June. Now, last year, the last day we were at 500 was at the end of May. So in the last time in general, we were 3 games over 500 was in August 2016. 2017. I think it was 17. 16 or 17, we were just over 3 in August, and that's as far as we got as we treaded back down. So this is just amazing stuff for this fan base, and you need to start showing up for games. And that's how we are where we are. They're not doing it conventionally. They're doing it with players who don't give up, who play every game, whether you go down or you have a big lead, they continue to fight. And that comes from the manager. Again, I was happy with the change in manager. I wasn't a fan of the old manager as far as managerial concerns are. He made this team worse. He made them lackadaisical, it would seem. There was no fire in that dugout like we see it now. And I also give some credit to the home run chain that I gave this team, because I'm sending my positive vibes through that home run chain daily, and it's obviously working. So keep up those home runs. Now, let's talk fans. This team, look, it's a great time in South Florida. You have the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup. It's game 3 as I'm recording this. You're down 2-0, but you're still in the Stanley Cup. So the Marlins aren't going to get the attention there. Now, not only are they in the Stanley Cup, or the Florida Panthers are in the Stanley Cup and share the market with the Marlins, but the Miami Heat are also in their NBA finals. So you're competing against 2 teams in the summer in June when you're 7 games over 500 flying under the radar out here. Then today it was announced that Lionel Messi is signing with Inter Miami. He's going to be here, one of the biggest stars ever, if not the biggest star ever in Major League in soccer or football in the world, is going to be on your franchise. And it was announced today. And all of this while the Marlins are 7 games over 500. So they need to start getting the attention of the South Florida fan. Look, I know the ballpark's really, really far. It really is far. And it's far from me. It's far from Broward. But Miami-Dade, you guys it's in the heart of Dade. You guys got to start showing up to the Marlins game. Support your team. Don't be bandwagon guys and jump on at the end. We don't want that. We want you there now. These guys deserve you to be the 10th person on the field at all times. They deserve it. And you should want to do it because this team is fun. They're fun to watch. They're scoring runs at home. They have the best home record in baseball right now. I think it's 21-13. They're winning at home. All right. So come out for a Friday, for a flashback Friday at home. It's fun wearing the Florida Marlin teal, celebrating the 30-year anniversary of this team. So please just come out and enjoy it with us. And I come out to at least one game a homestand. Again, I mentioned I don't live that close, so it's very difficult to make it out during the week. And I get traffic stinks. But if you live in Miami-Dade and if you could support the Heat and sell out their arena every game, considering you have to go east, this ballpark's in the heart of Miami. You're not crossing over 95 to get to the arena. It's on the west side of things. So you guys should be filling up the Marlins ballpark, Lone Depot Park, every game once these playoffs are done. And I hope we're still in the same spot. Now, where are we going? So we're 7 games over 500. The Marlins now will travel to Chicago, not to face the Cubs. With the new scheduling, you face every team in the major leagues every year. You do a home and home for the next season. So this season, you'll be at the White Sox starting this weekend for the next 3. Then the Marlins are going to head over to Seattle. And Seattle's not doing the greatest either. So you have 2 sub-500 teams, 2 more sub-500 teams, and you should win these series. It's hard to win on the road. I understand that. Traveling is a B, but you're the Marlins, and you just beat up on 2 other teams that do not have good records. You should continue that at least against the next 2, with Chicago for 3, and then Seattle for 3. Then you come back across the country. You have a day off next Thursday. You come back across the country and you finish another long home away stand, another long travel, 2 weekends. Then you're in Washington, D.C. That's division games. They're not a good team either. And we've had their number for at least last year. And one of our 4 sweeps this season is against the Nationals. But that was at home. You got to win on the road. Here's our opportunity. I see them at least finishing 5-4 on this road trip in the 9 games. I know the competition is inferior, but it's always hard winning on the road. And home teams always have an advantage of some way, shape, or form. Look at the Oakland Athletics, who we beat 3 games straight. They beat Atlanta, who are ahead of us, in Oakland, because it's hard to win on the road, especially on West Coast trips. And the same goes for East Coast trips for the West. So the Marlins have 9 games. They should go 5-4 in the next 9. and then come back 8 games over 500 if they're able to do that. At worst, you don't want to come home less than 6. You don't want to lose. Yeah, if you lose 5 of 9 on the road, I understand it. So you come back 6 games over 500 for the next homestand. So this is a great time to be a Marlins fan. I'm so happy to be able to do this podcast online on a StreamYard. So I'm learning how to do this. I hope I recorded it right and I'm able to present it the way it needs to. Hopefully I'm able to have fans in the future finally to talk with me now that I've done this. So we'll go from there. You can also some news about Loud Marlins Fan, me, Chase Blake. I do have a weekly network that I've joined. Sorry, it's called the South Florida Tribune. You could find them at Tribune South on Twitter. You could find them South Florida Tribune on Facebook. We have a network on YouTube, the South Florida Tribune Network. They put on all different types of sporting shows throughout the week, including our favorite, baseball. And I have been asked and accepted a contributor job with them to co-host or be on the panel, however you want to put it. I will be there every Tuesday night on 108 Stitches baseball show on South Florida Tribune Network. That's a South Florida Tribune Network on YouTube. Please find it, subscribe, and then come talk to us via web chat in there every Tuesday night at 9:15 to about 10 o'clock. We go for about 45 minutes. You could also please go follow the Fish on First team. They're the former Stripes team. Not going to promote that other group, but go to Fish on First at Fish on First podcast for more Marlins coverage. They cover 360 of the Marlins. They have everything. Young group of young men run by Eli Sussman, and he's done a great job and deserves to continue to get a following and super subscribers on their network. So thank you for watching. Also, Locked On Marlins, the Locked On Marlins with Peter Pratt. I will be recording an episode with him on Friday this week to discuss mostly probably everything we discussed here and the positive mentality right now going on with the Marlins. As always, you can go to intheclutch.com using code LMF at checkout to save a percentage. Like I believe it's 10% off your entire purchase. Intheclutch.com is Major League Baseball Players Association approved shirts. The fun shirts that you see them wearing, you can get them there. And it's the only place to get Loud Marlin fans gear that I've designed with them, including the Pots and Pans Miami t-shirt. I love banging those pots and pans. And of course, the Let's Get Louder t-shirt. So let's get louder, Miami. Show up for games. We'll see you soon. Let's freaking go. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Loud Marlins Fans Podcast.